Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Angela Garner. And she's here today to share with us her new book, When It's Time to Say Goodbye, Preparing for the Transition of Your Beloved Pet. Angela, an animal bereavement specialist and former nurse, founded a national support service in the UK to help people through the grieving process, and she has developed a wide range of pet bereavement support resources. Angela lives in the UK and was awarded a fellowship by the Society of Bereavement Practitioners for her work. So let's welcome to the show, Angela Garner.
Hello, Marianne, and thank you for inviting me onto your show to talk about my new book. I know it's a challenging topic, but it's an important one because saying goodbye to a beloved pet is the hardest part of caring for them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, when my dog was transitioning, I had wished there was a book like this, because it really does. It's just such a great book. It's got so much good information. You know, why did you decide now was the time to write this book?
Over the last 20 years or so, I've supported many people through their individual pet loss grief. And subsequently, I've written a lot of literature about the subject, but then I wanted to create a book which would cover as many issues as possible, including the ones which don't get spoken about much, like having a pet put to sleep because of behaviour problems. And I wanted to reach out to people to offer somewhere they can go to find the guidance and support they need all in one place, so they can turn to it when they need it.
Well, how empowering is that? You know, and it's interesting because when we look at losing a pet, a lot of us don't even know how to prepare for that.
That's right. And the preparation, when it's possible, because it isn't always possible, you know, tragic things happen. You know, a pet can die in an accident and a sudden illness. But when we can prepare, if they are sadly terminally ill or becoming very elderly, then we can actually get things in place in ourselves and to support the animal as it's coming towards the end of its life, so that their welfare is the best all the way through. And that's vitally important. Because we need to be able to look back afterwards and think, right, well, at least I did everything I could.
Yeah, see, there's no regrets there.
Exactly, yes.
So when we start to prepare, what are some things that we should have in mind?
I would say to actually begin to have some very open and honest conversations with the vet, because they are the person who can actually guide us through this difficult time. Also, the vet nurses are brilliant as well, in my experience, because there's many issues that we are unsure about. It's like how to assess the quality of life ongoingly, what to look out for. Because when it starts, you see changes in your pet, like one day they don't want to eat very much and normally they're guzzling, you know, everything in sight, then it's worrying. You start wondering what's going on, and are they coming towards the end? And you need to understand what's happening, basically. So the veterinary profession are there to help us, but I think we need to sometimes ask very openly and honestly about the issue. And, you know, will my pet be coming to the end of his or her life very soon, and what can I do to keep them comfortable? So it's a very uncertain time for the guardian. And I use the word guardian rather than owner in the book, because I think it is more appropriate way of looking at, our pets rather than we own them.
Yeah, it ends up that they own us anyway, right?
They do so often.
Yeah, that's a role reversal right there.
That's right.
Well, and and so pets, I mean, I agree with you, because we are their caretakers, become part of our family. And so having these discussions, I think, can be really difficult for some people. If a dog is coming to a part, when he or she's reaching old age, is that the time when we should start having that conversation, or just as any problem arises? Like, when's a good time?
Well, if it's an elderly pet, then it's really important, I found out, not to assume that things that you see them suffering, like, is just old age. Because yes, it probably is old age, but it's old age causing medical changes. So they actually might need medication, they might need assessment, they might need blood tests, which could indicate things that can be treated and the pet can continue longer. But I think also for our own peace of mind, we have to start preparing ourselves, our head and our heart, that they are coming towards the end of their life. It might be a year on, might be a few months. So we then know we need to look out for things and watch their body condition and what's deteriorating, and, are they still happy, basically.
Yeah, that's such an important thing. I know with my dog, I mean, he developed arthritis. So he was on medication for that. So he would be pain free. And a lot of times people don't even consider that their pet may be in pain.
That's right. And particularly like with horses, or donkeys, they can become quite elderly and start to suffer with their joints. And because, they actually, that can be really painful for them. So all these things need to be considered, or teeth that get worn down in their quines, for instance. They may need like a special diet, and there's a lot of care that's required for elderly pets, big or small, any size, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider there. Just like people, we get into pain, and so something to kind of think about as they get into those later years.
Yes, that's right. And there's also it's suffering of different types, because as people, as humans, we can suffer without being in pain. We could feel sort of like really nauseous, or, as we were saying just now, joint stiffness, immobility. All these factors need to be considered and cared for, so that the animal can actually carry on with good quality of life for the time that they have left.
So, what are some of the deciding factors that we should take into consideration when we should have these discussions with our vet if our pet is needing to transition?
I mean, we all want for our pets that they die in their sleep when it's their time. Unfortunately, apparently that is rather rare. Although I was talking to somebody yesterday who said that many of his cats have died in their sleep and died naturally at home peacefully. But mostly, I think the vets would agree with me that interventions needed, and we need to release them before. And there are indications that the vets can give us to tell us when the time is coming closer. And at that time, what we can do is like hold the space for them and try and keep on top of what's happening, try and keep so we can still think about things, because once the emotions get in, well, we know what that's like. It's very difficult to think. And the grief starts before we actually lose the pet, of course, because we know it's coming. So we need to try and keep ourselves together. And in the book, I've got various guidances of what we can ask the vet. You know, what will tell me that my dog or my cat or budgie, whatever, is coming towards the end? What will indicate that? How will I know? And people often say, you'll know when it's time to say goodbye. Yes, we will at the point, but the time leading up to that is fraught with uncertainties. And that's why in the book I've got so many activities to talk to the vet and understand what's actually happening so we can stay on top of it, basically.
Yeah, I was really impressed that your book had, it's talking about plans for pets' end of life. And I thought, gosh, how important is that? Because it's a discussion a lot of us don't have. And if you have a large dog and it can't walk, all of a sudden, you're having these discussions.
That's right. And that's something to, there's the practical aspects as well, especially as you were saying, like with a large dog. And, I remember in the past supporting someone who had a large dog who was very, very unwell. And she ended up sleeping downstairs to be by the back door, so because the dog could no longer get up the stairs and needed help to go into the garden to go to the loo. So it's like she'd been sleeping on the floor next to her dog in the kitchen, excuse me, for some time. And it was stressful for her and very wearing. And I think it had become stressful for the dog as well, struggling very much so. And sometimes we need somebody to sort of recognize and say, do you think this is enough? Do you think it's time? And it's very hard. It's very hard. We lost our dog in August last year. He was 13 and a half years old. And so I've been through it myself and in the past, of course, many times. And it's a tough journey. It's one of the hardest things we have to do sometimes.
Yeah, there's no easy path with that. With if it's a dog, if it's a cat, if it's a horse, if it's a goldfish. I mean, there's no easy path there.
That's right. And if we can look back and think, obviously we'll feel devastated after losing a beloved companion animal. But if we can look back and think, right, I did everything I could. And there might be, one or two worries, but, should I have done that or done that sooner? But it's like we can work through those things. But if we've done the best we can for the pet, then when they have passed on, it's time to focus on our own grief and ourselves and coming through it, which is also covered in the book, how to work through the grief.
Well, and you talk about something I was kind of surprised about. I mean, you always hear about pets having separation anxiety, but then you talk about in this book, you talk about how coping from loss and other types of separation. And a lot of times people don't think about that. We get so used to having our little buddies with us.
Oh, yes, yes. That's the grief can be overwhelming. There's no doubt about that. When we've actually, finally said goodbye, and it is difficult. If you've taken your pet to the vets and you come home without your pet, and then there's everything at home that is still there that was all about them, the bowls on the floor and that kind of thing. And this is when, people need support, they need understanding, they need to be able to talk to somebody sometimes, to talk to somebody else about it so that they don't feel alone. Because it can be a very lonely time for people, particularly if that pet was their sole companion or the central part of their life.
Yeah, I can understand that. You're so attached to your pet and it's there, with you all the time, especially during the pandemic. I mean, our little buddies are like with us.
Well, yes, that's right. Yes, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden we're in a place where, maybe they've gone to a point where it's the best decision is to go ahead and put them down. Then it's like, okay, so how do we deal with that grief? And I know some people actually feel guilty for putting their pets down.
Yes. Now that aspect you've brought up there is a really important one, guilt, because that arises a lot in people. And that's why I've been trying to help people to work through, where possible beforehand, to do everything that's best for their beloved pet, so that afterwards there isn't so much suffering for them through guilt. Because when it is the right time and you make that decision and you can feel it inside you, there is nothing to feel guilty about. It's a very honourable thing to do, to actually let them go when they need to go. But of course, there will be the grief that comes with any loss, significant loss that we feel. And that's, what we have to work through and give ourselves the time and space to do that. And the time and space to express what we feel, not to try and squash it all down inside and pretend everything's all right, because, might worry other people, think, well, it was only your cat. That's not for anyone else to judge. It's like what we feel is what we feel. And if we loved them, we will feel grief. And that's where friends and family can be such a great help. And the pet bereavement support services that are there for people. There is much more available nowadays than there was years ago, I have to say, for which I'm very grateful.
Yes, what a great thing to have pet bereavement services available to people, because, gosh, so many people, they probably don't even know that it exists.
Yes, that's right. Well, certainly in the UK, there's been pet bereavement support for many, many years. I myself did set up and run within a small charity, a preparing for pet loss service, and then would support people before and after the pet loss. And it is much more recognised nowadays, the effects of it and the effects on children as well. There's studies done on pet bereavement in children. So it's really good that this area is being people are much more aware of it than before, so we can talk about it more easily.
Yeah, they're really exploring what's going on there. One of the things I like about your book too, you have activities, and one of them, we're talking about coping with guilt. It talks about making a circle on a paper and then looking at all the happy things that you made their life happy about. And I love that, because a lot of times people get stuck in, maybe some of the not so happy parts.
That's right. And that was a way of showing people how you don't want to dismiss like the many years of what you've done for a pet to make them happy, well, and once they have passed on, it's so easy to just think of those final moments, but actually there's often years of love and care that has been given to that animal. So it's creating that balance, and it's like creating a new screensaver, so that you default to that rather than keep going back to, oh, I let them down and all this sort of thing. And it helps people to begin to link to some of the very, very special memories of the relationship they have with their pet.
And to really focus on those, as opposed
Yes.
to the negative thoughts about, the pet passing. And I think that's so powerful.
We do need to give time for the raw grief, the tears, the anguish. But when we can, the moments where we can lift ourselves up again, and it might just be a few moments to start with in the day, and not to think we've got to keep feeling sad, because some people feel guilty because they start smiling again after losing their pet. They feel they must stay grieving, but that is not the case. And I've often said to people, well, do you think they would have wanted you to stay unhappy like this? Of course they wouldn't. And so it is actually trying to work through things, lift ourselves up when we can, and then be prepared for little setbacks, because even when you feel right, I'm moving forward, it can be something very small, like a sound or a smell, something on the telly, or something, a piece of music even, that reminds us and takes us back into the grief, and we can think, oh no, I'm back here again, I'm never going to get over this. It's not the case. That's having a setback, and it's so often 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back, until eventually we're stepping forward. And I think one of the loveliest things about doing pet bereavement support work is when somebody sends me a photo. They've decided to get a new cat or dog or hamster, and you see a new relationship starting to flourish.
Oh, I just love that.
Yeah, that's the upside.
Get that upside. Well, and I know there's so much that we need to do for our self-care, and you have a whole chapter just kind of dedicated to that. What are some tips that our listeners can use for their self-care after losing a pet?
Right. It's time after losing the pet. It is time to focus on your own well-being. And grief is very exhausting, and it can have an effect physically. And, if we have some physical or mental health conditions, the grief can upset those for a while. So that's something to be aware of. And, medication might need to be changed initially, because the emotions can, like if somebody's got, say, asthma, for instance, the emotions can cause the asthma to be worsened just for a little while. So it's those kind of very down-to-earth things to think about. People don't always feel like eating, and it's important to try and have something nutritious to eat each day. And something I do emphasize in the book is about staying hydrated, because when we cry a lot, we're losing a lot of fluid, of course, and we need to actually boost the immune system by drinking plenty throughout the day as well. And okay, people might want to sort of have alcohol, which is okay, but if it's too much, that in itself is dehydrating. So it's actually looking at some pretty basic things to start with, but also thinking about situations you're going into while you still feel so vulnerable from the grief. For instance, if you're working, and I know it's a bit different, very different at the moment with lockdowns in different places and a lot of people working from home. But in an environment when you're going into work with other people, your colleagues, and you're still feeling the grief of the pet loss, it's like deciding what you want to say, because not everyone understands what you're going through. So it's thinking about these things rather than just going into them and trying to work out how you will integrate back into life while you're still feeling so vulnerable and possibly feeling low as well from the grief.
Well, it's so good that you have that in this book, because a lot of times people just don't even think about their level of grief that they're experiencing after their pet leaves. And then, also that they may need to turn to professional help, which is 100% okay.
Yes, absolutely. And that is in the book about getting professional help, because people can wonder in themselves or worry whether they can actually carry on without their pet. And any thoughts like that are like alert systems saying you need to talk to somebody, get some help. And there are indications in the book where to go. So it's really encouraging people to reach out and get the support they need, and know that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel what they feel. It's valid and it's respected. So, not to feel awkward about it.
Yeah, I believe I've heard a saying, something along the lines is you grieve as much as you loved. And when we love our pets, the grieving part's going to really hurt too.
Yes, I often find myself saying that grief is the other side of caring, and we grieve because we do care. They go hand in hand, don't they?
They really do. And I know in your book you cover, and our listeners definitely want to pick up a copy of your book, but you cover, children that grieve and other animals that grieve as well. And a lot of times people don't really consider, if you have a couple dogs or a couple horses, when they lose their friend, it's really tough for them.
That's right. And in certain species, like I know for donkeys, because they can be really bonded, and if they lose their bonded companion, because they are usually kept in pairs, at least, or more, or herd, and they can actually become seriously ill, to do with some physiological process in the body. And other animals, I've certainly seen grief in other animals and birds. And yes, sometimes, you need to actually think, I'll take them to the vet to get them checked. Occasionally, they can become ill through something else at the same time, and it can easily be put down to, they're grieving for, their companion. So it works both ways, actually. So it's always best to get things checked out.
Well, that's just so important. Angela, I thought your book was such an amazing book, and it's the book I wish I had when my dog was ready to pass. I highly suggest it for our listeners. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Right. Well, my website has all the information all about the books and what I'm up to. And that's petlosspress.com. So that's the best way to connect with me. There is an email address on there as well. And yes, I will put any events and things that are coming up on there.
So we can stay in touch with you there. Well, Angela, thank you so much for taking the time to be on a show with us here today.
Thank you very much for inviting me again, Marianne. It's really good to have a chance to talk about when it's time to say goodbye. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Angela. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, When It's Time to Say Goodbye, Preparing for the Transition of Your Beloved Pet. When It's Time to Say Goodbye is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Again, if you'd like to reach out to Angela, you can at petlosspress.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.